done by the community, led by the community. So that is where I have paused in my life right now, where I have realized that for anything to be successful, you can't put things on a plate. I have done my bachelor's in planning. I've done my master's in landscape architecture, and then I've done another master's in conservation studies. And what's happened as a result is that I kind of very comfortably tend to jump realms, and I have always treated this hardcore design work that I have, my core experience is design, landscape architecture. But I've always used that as a tool to get to something more. We don't do a lot of commercial work. We do limited commercial projects, but we do singular, large-scale, highly visible kind of works, which help us to streamline our construction experience. That's how I look at them. And so one of our projects, which was in Chandigarh, which started in 2010, end of 2010, was a project which was a multi-use development. And the reason we took up that project, going away from our regular ethos of not sort of working on large-scale commercial things, was to develop a central space in a mall to be something which had a cultural beat. Because we're realizing more and more that this is where the youngsters head. And if that's where they're headed, how do you give them a sense of maybe what that city is, what all can happen in that city through this small space, without making it all about retail or only about retail. We are designing spaces where people interact. We're giving them opportunities for a lot of cultural exposure. So the space itself may not be cultural, so to say, but it gives an opportunity for performances. And there are images that I found online about this project where there were these Bhangra performances happening, religious things happening, and I was a little, I was happy that, okay, great. Here you just have to make a space. In a place like India, it's going to get used. But when we approach a commercial project, we think of it with this beat of the user, that it has to be used. It's not about very posh detailing. It is about all of that, but that's not the end of it. One conservation project which I worked on as a very sort of end of the food chain, I would say, was Humayun's tomb garden conservation. And this was done as part of a team. I was working in an office for 6.5 years, and I was playing a very small role in this project. But this project, or being involved in this project, seeing what was happening, completely changed my life's journey, where I realized that historic spaces was something where you could marry design and research, and bring something out which was really very engaging, very exciting. So I think that was a huge change. And the second project, this was 1999 to 2002. And the other project, which was in 2005, which we did with another large organization, was Pinjore Gardens in Chandigarh. So I always say that my Chandigarh journey started at Pinjore and ended at Elante, and they're two completely different spaces which don't even at the moment talk to each other, right? But Pinjore was an eye-opener of a project from a conservation perspective, because here I was sitting in Bangalore and coming to visit Pinjore, which I had visited from, I'm born in Chandigarh, and I've been visiting since my childhood. And Pinjore was, just doing I always say there was a eureka moment on Pinjore where my team of young Bangalore architects were sitting and doing a geometric analysis on plan. And we weren't being able to break through on the guz. How much was the measure of the guz? We just weren't getting it. And we would keep trying to play with CAD and we would keep trying to change it. And then there was this one afternoon where this youngster came up to me and said, I think I've got it. Because suddenly all lines were intersecting where they were meant to intersect. And it was this moment which I think no project can give you. Because when I went back to site after this particular revelation, which would be a usual thing for conservationists, but for me it was my first. And I went back to site, and this project was, the client was a tourism client. So they wanted to enlarge a road, and they asked us, can we dig and increase the carriageway? And I said, you know what, based on our geometric analysis, and we did a little guz calculation, we said, there might be a toe wall right there. And when they dug and they found the remains of a toe wall, I think nothing that I've done before or after has ever been equal to that moment at site. It's so vividly etched in my memory. And I think that is what gives that energy, that excitement of working on these projects. How much can we, or how much of our past, our culture, our learning, our knowledge systems can we use in our present designs? So I took a decision when I set up the company that I'll always do contemporary projects, because I felt that the real on-site experience can only happen in contemporary. And I knew that I was preparing myself for historic spaces, but the historic spaces would require the quality, the timeliness of how a contemporary project runs. So I always took this that it'll always be a two-pronged practice. Now I'm finding that so all this while it was the contemporary feeding the historic, right? Meaning that, how does that making BOQs and tenders and drawings and professional drawings feed into the historic projects? Now I can see it's the, sort of the other way. Yeah, it's happening the other way now, which is that how is all the little stuff that we keep doing on historic stuff and reading and writing and all of that, how does that go back into our contemporary? So, I worked on the Delhi International Airport, which was a hugely iconic project. But it's not that because it was iconic, I am very proud of being part of that project. The learning under a situation of that stress and handling the amount we were handling in the time that we were given was a huge, huge learning, And I think somewhere separating the iconic from the learning has been very important. The first few years, so I started teaching in SPA end of 98. I was one of the young visiting faculties, and that was giving back to the fraternity, because I felt I maintained that pretty much through my working years, that one day a week is going to be teaching. It could be 2 half days, it could be 1 full day, it could be a couple of days in, I would teach in the postgrad department, undergrad department, Bangalore, I taught in RV. That was my giving back to the students. And I used to love it. Then now I don't think it's really directly about giving back. It's about honestly, what difference can one make? I don't know whether they're the same thing. Yes. So last year I took a decision around a year and a half back that I'm going to stop teaching, which was a huge decision. It was like I was almost going against my thread, because I had never given up teaching except maybe through very, very busy periods over spanning 6 months or something. And when I decided that I'm going to give up, I really went through a lot of internal strife. And what I was telling myself was that I'm giving up something to get time on my hands and to get the freedom to think as to what I want to do with that time. So last year we started our first activity and we named it Culture Connect. And two friends who have children, who are young, and we decided we're going to do cultural activities for children. And because we don't have time, we would only do it over the holidays. So we did 10 modules over almost 2 months, 2.5 months in the summer. And we took 15 kids, 5 of our own, so 20 kids. And we did it in a place called Sanskriti Kendra in Anandgram, which was designed by my mentor. And we did all sorts of things. We did dance workshops and we called experts. We were only doing the introduction and wrap up, and we were connecting everything to nature, culture, and all of that, and only about India. So we had professional dancers coming in, talking to people, movie makers, artists. But what I'm trying to say is, so I took my time out from the teaching, which caused a lot of angst, and I put it to all of these things. So that in some sense is giving back. I don't consider myself to be someone who's really I am very spiritual, but I don't think I'm someone who's centered on giving back. I think I am, but more quietly, and I do it where I enjoy. Obviously, we work for, why I say obvious is that because it's a practice or any other practice like ours, we would work for people who can afford it. Okay, so one is working for people who can pay, right? Now we are at a stage in our life for the last few years that we're working on a lot of government projects. So we're working for people, we're working for government that has the money, but we're working for people who do not have access to what our core work is. So these are open spaces, designing these spaces. They could be historic spaces. And now we're in a place where we are saying, okay, what or which are the heritage projects which we work on, which would make a difference, right? They're not very easy to come by. Many of them get shelved before they see the light of day. But I think, again, it's a very personal journey. Community-driven projects. Not doing it for the community. Doing it done by the community. Led by the community. So that is where I have paused in my life right now, where I have realized that for anything to be successful, you can't put things on a plate. There has to be a sense of ownership which comes from the people who are using it. They will protect it. They will protect it far better than any Mali, guard, and so on and so forth. And I decided that let's start talking to them young. And just telling them that, I love this whole idea of story weaving through heritage. I said, okay, these are your grandmoms. Their teeth are gone. They're all wrinkled. But don't you like the parathas and the halwa your grandmom makes the best? I said, yes. So that's what these spaces are. They teach you, you just have to open your eyes and learn. And then when I was teaching in Bangalore, I took my students to some slums in Bangalore, RV students, undergrad students. And I was always amazed at how clean these slums were. They were, the moment you entered someone's tenement, it was absolutely, I could remove my shoes and walk in. There'd be little rangoli outside. All the women would have the flowers. They would look far neater than what I'm looking, right? But the moment you step out in the lane, yeah, so there is a lot of opportunity to do stuff in these spaces, to do stuff where these spaces exist next to historic spaces. I have a belief that a historic space is not, it's got such a long term, it's the lambi race ka ghoda, right? It's lived out and it needs to live out if you allow it to. And the issue that I'm finding more and more is that people are so caught up with the moment that they're looking at a historic space to be something which they take care of, make it look the way it looks. But the learning from it is very minimal. The understanding of the amount of learning that it has is very minimal. So that is the reason we started this thing with children. And I only think about what Charles Courier said on my graduation 20 years back. And I completely have lived my 20 years on that, which is do what you believe in, work really hard, and money comes your way. And I have seen it happen in my life. And I intend, if God willing, if I can, to continue living that way. That I do not take my decisions based on business plans. I do business planning, I do all of that, but I do not take decisions based on money.